All right, so this is the inaugural lesson, discussion, whatever you want to call it, on this would be Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I'm going to go through chapter one. Now, this would be best if you had already prior read the chapter, and then I'm just going to go through and point out some of the more important things. I'm just trying to put on a little music here. I've got the let's see, Spotify, the Friday the 13th soundtracks going on, which is wonderful background music. All right, Lord of the Flies. Now I know that again that some of you have read this, and others of you have not. So that's why I said it's best if if you've read through the chapter before we have this discussion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the actual PDF up that I put it for you guys, and then I'm just going to underline some stuff and have a conversation. So you can use that, and then I'll save the annotations and put them onto Classroom, and then you can use those to help yourself with the questions. Cool. All right. Again, if you got any questions, just email them to me or post them on Classroom, whatever. So, all right. So let's get started here. All right, so I'm going to need to, let's see, share the screen here. Again, it's first time I've done this, so we'll see if this actually works. I'm going to stick my handsome face up there in the corner, and then that should give you the text that we're looking at, right? So let me see if I can't make that a little bit bigger. And then I'll be able to get that out of there. Yeah, make it a little bigger even than that. Oh, nope. That's not what I wanted to do. So I will undo that. All right. So, all right. So let's go through this. I'm going to have to pull this down here so that I can. All right. So, first thing you need to keep in mind is that this novel, again, I know some of you haven't read it, but I'm going to go ahead and explain this kind of in a way that, like, if you have read it, I know that not the best case scenario, but there's a few things that you've got to keep in mind as you're reading through. So on the surface level, you've got the story of a group of boys who their plane crashes and they end up on an island. We know that from this chapter, you'll see that what's going on off the island is basically World War III. There was a nuclear explosion. There was a plane crash. These boys ended up on this island, and there appear to be no adults here. So what you have is Golding is setting up kind of like a social experiment here. And there are a few things that are rather important. One, it's important that these are British schoolboys. So to understand the context of the novel and to understand, you have to understand where it's coming from. The idea of British schoolboys coming from, especially if these guys are coming from like a private school where they, prep school where they were wearing uniforms. So what we start off with are these young boys who, based off the stereotypes of the British, were very proper, very well behaved. But at the same time, you're also dealing with young boys. I believe the oldest is Ralph, the main character, and he's 12. So the oldest is 12, and they go all the way down to like 5 or 6 years old. So that is important because then as we watch through the novel and you watch the boys and the whole situation begin to deteriorate, Golding sets it so that, even though they are young boys, that they start off at a, very high rate. Give me 1 second. All right, and I'm back because my children don't understand the whole idea of that. I'm working from my office, so let's see. Actually, it's my wife's office. So we'll go back to this if I can. All right, so where did I leave off? So the idea that, so the historical context, the setting, where the boys come from, They're on an island. It's very much a social experiment. What happens when you take a group of boys and you do not give them parental or any sort of adult supervision? And then the idea is, okay, so what's going to happen? So there are a few things that are going to be focused on here when it comes to symbolism. So there is the story of the boys that are on this island, but then there's the symbolic ideas that Golding mixes in with it. So one is that you're looking at the creation of government. So the idea of these young boys being on this island is now we're going to watch them go from, basically from ground zero to watching them try to create some sort of a society, some sort of a civilization, because they realize that they may not get off this island. Hold on a second. All right, and I'm back again. Another interrupt, this time my dogs. So let's see. So far it has been my sons and then my dog. And now let's see who else can interrupt me in here. So, like I said, it's we're going to see this government, the idea of them trying to set up some sort of civilization. And the way they go about it is they go about it the way that they know how it's been gone about before. Is they go to what the adults have done in the past. They use what they've seen, kind of how it is that, most people parent is by, using what they've seen their parents do. That's not always the best case scenario. And in this case, you're looking at these boys who are putting a society together based off what the parents or the adults have done. But yet the irony of it is that off this island is a war. The adults are at war right now. So obviously whatever they did didn't work out very well. The other thing that you're going to see here is a ton of religious symbolism. I wouldn't say a ton, but there's quite a bit of religious symbolism here as well. And so as we go through, I'm going to be pointing to that, because the main question that this novel, besides the societal aspect, the number one question that Golding is asking, and then he's answering basically himself, is the question of being, is man inherently evil? Man being human beings. Is there an inherent evil inside of human beings? Meaning that when we're born, there's different philosophical ideas that, people can be born, people can be born either with like a blank slate. That we're born with goodness, or we're born with bad, or we're born with both, or there's all kinds of different philosophical ideas. Well, Golding's argument is that we are born with this religiously, he was a religious man, that we're born with this inherent evil, meaning that, it's there from the beginning, and that we have to be taught to not do evil things. That it's not that we're not taught evil, the idea that it's there from the beginning, and then we have to have the idea of good taught to us, especially in our youth. And if you think about that, there's a truth to that, in that, when you have babies, they don't necessarily know good from evil. They just do what they want to do. You see small children, they don't know evil, but they hit, they'll bite. You put two babies together, one will take a pacifier from the other, even though the other one's crying. There's things that they do, and then you have to teach those children, no, don't do that. That's selfish, or that's not fair, or that's mean, or that hurts the other kid. You have to teach kids, don't steal, don't bite, don't fight, don't say mean things, because, kids are very truthful about what they say. They'll say something, you have to teach them that's mean. So there's all of these things that kind of show that there is maybe an inherent evil there. So as the novel goes, that's kind of the thesis of what Golding is trying to push here, and so that's what he's trying to prove. So let's start from the beginning here. And the first person we meet is our protagonist. We meet this boy Ralph, and right away Golding is setting us up to like Ralph. And it's important when we're talking about politics, especially here with this. And this first chapter really does deal with them setting up civilization. There's not as much of the religious stuff yet. That the boy with the fair hair, and there's all kinds of descriptions that I've asked, one of the questions asking you to go through and find of Ralph, that in a way we immediately, as a reader, we start to identify with Ralph, and we kind of see him as the leader right away, as all the boys do. So the idea is that Golding is giving us the understanding of why the boys immediately select Ralph as the leader. and not, you know, not some of the other boys. And most of this comes because they don't know each other really. It's a bunch of boys from prep school. None of them really are, they just are all crowded onto this plane. There seem to be boys from all over England, and they're on these planes, and they don't, like I said, they don't really know each other very well. And so they choose him immediately just because of his look. We also see that when the plane crashed, we get this idea of there being, you know, there being a scar, and the scar itself becomes symbolic later on when it comes to the religious aspect of it. The fact that Golding continually calls it a scar is supposed to, the connotation of that is, you know, that there was a wound, that something was fine, or kind of like your skin, you know, nothing wrong with it, and there's a cut, and then what comes from that. So that idea of the scar itself becomes symbolic as we go. So we get to Piggy, which again is a, you know, obviously a very awful name to give the young boy. And we immediately, just as we got with Golding with the boy with the fair hair, we get these, you know, these descriptions of Piggy that turn us away from him. You know, he was shorter than the, you know, the fair. You see, again, you can see the description with Ralph. Very fat. He came, you know, and there's all of these. Through his thick spectacles. Those of you with glasses like me, you know, that's generally seen as a handicap. It sucks to say that, but for the most part, especially for males, having glasses, you know, you look at Superman, right? When Superman is, you know, Superman, and he's all tough and can lift the world and do everything, what does he do? He's got no glasses. When he wants to be nerd and be weak, Clark Kent, what does he do? Puts on glasses. It's the only thing he does, puts on glasses, and immediately he's seen as weak, right? So that idea of the glasses is stereotypically, you know, seen as a weakness. And so this idea of Piggy is, we immediately recognize with Piggy that, you know, that there is this a weakness. He's fat, you know, he's scratched, he's plump. Oh, look at the word plump, and his thick spectacles. And then there's a lot more that goes along with that. We also get this phrase here. So then we're trying to pick up what the boys already know. They're very lost. We're trying to figure out what's been going on here. He says, where's the man with the megaphone? Now, the boys were herded on. We'll see this. The boys were herded on to the plane by this man who had a megaphone. And the thing about the megaphone, and it's important because later in the chapter, they find this conch shell. And this conch shell becomes this symbol of authority. Well, the man with the megaphone is also, the megaphone itself gives authority, and it's kind of an odd thing, but when you think about it, you know, if you were standing outside in a group and somebody were to get a megaphone and stand up on a pedestal or stand up on a stool and start giving directions and telling people to walk a certain way, you'd get a lot of people that would do it even though they have no idea who this person is. But the fact that that person has a megaphone gives somebody a certain amount of power. And so you know, that is foreshadowing this whole thing with the conch shell later on in the story. Now we get, as it goes, we get the whole, you know, the realization that there's no grown-ups, and they're, you know, thinking about the pilot of the plane and so on. And we get this, that they were attacked. And then farther on, we find out about the, you know, they're talking about the nuclear explosions and so on. So we get the idea of exactly how it is that they, you know, they ended up, they talk about the plane, you know, I saw the flames here and so on. So, you know, letting us know exactly what's been going on. The cabin's what caused the scar, right? We then get immediately this here with Ralph. What's your name? Piggy asks Ralph. And the fat boy waited for his name, but Ralph, there's a rudeness here. Now, the issue is that Ralph becomes the leader on this island initially, and his first reaction is to reject Piggy. And the thing about Piggy is Piggy's symbolic of multiple things. One of them is intelligence, the other is civilization. And so the first thing we see is Ralph rejecting those very ideas. We'll get more to that later. We get to, let me see. I'm trying to find this because I'm trying to match up my book with your book here. The shore was sledged with. What am I looking? What am I looking for here? Oh, here we go. And then we get this here. This is Ralph, right? He became conscious of the weight of clothes, kicked his shoes off fiercely, and ripped off the stock. So, left off the terrace. This idea of the clothes is going to be a symbol of civilization as well. You think about, when people are seen as the most civilized, think about how civilization, think about the, I want to make sure my spelling was right. Think about how we judge people. We judge people based off their clothes. If you go to some, you go to some third world country, or you go out into the bush somewhere and you've got people wearing loincloths and, so on, we would assume that those people are uncivilized people. You go to a first world country and people are wearing, incredibly nice suits and dresses. And we think those people are very, you look at somebody like, in England, and you think those are folks are very civilized. Yet, the question then becomes, what does, being civilized mean in general? And that goes more on. But anyway, the idea of clothes is, in this story, becomes symbolic of that. We get more of a description of Ralph here, right? And quite a bit of description of Ralph. Again, why it is that we side with Ralph. He looks critically at Ralph's golden body and then down at his own clothes, and you see Piggy feeling sorry for himself. The first person that starts thinking about, okay, we're on this island and we need to start figuring things out is, and you can see the description here, the fat boy, Piggy. We need to start knowing names. First thing, he's the guy. He starts, he's a symbol of intelligence. He's a symbol of civilization as well. And he starts coming up with, okay, these are some things we need to get done. And in reality, the leader, when they start choosing leaders, it should have been Piggy. But because nobody, and Golding sets us up, nobody's going to listen to him because of how he looks. He's very meek. He's very shy. He says, they used to call me Piggy. And then Ralph, laughs, makes fun of him, very rude in that, that rejection of who he is. So I am going to jump a little bit here. We get the whole thing here with the why he's probably not the best shape here, right? About his aunt owning a candy store. And then kind of Piggy's the one that, brings up the realization of the situation. They're talking about the people. He says, they're all dead. This is an island. Nobody don't know we're here. And then we get this. We may stay here till we die. And at that point, Ralph says, get my clothes. So that idea of him realizing, like, at first it seems fun, like, oh, no rules, no nothing. But then again, the realization hits. And so now he gets his clothes and puts his clothes back on. And he says here, put on a gray shirt once more, was strangely pleased with that idea of civilization coming back to that little tiny bit of savagery there, right? Because that's kind of the line that you're looking at. So on one side is being civilized, the other side is being a savage. All right, so we're moving on here. Let's see. So then we get the conch shell, right? So now they find the conch shell here, which becomes a symbol of authority. It's conch, not conch. I used to think it was conch, but so this, just like the megaphone, becomes a symbol of authority. And so they use that to call the rest of the boys. So get that. Careful. Again, Ralph's incredibly rude to Piggy all the way through, being mean, which, young boys tend to do, especially when there's no adults around. And again, it's Piggy's idea that we can use it to, he says, we can use this to call the others. Where is that exactly? Because again, your book doesn't necessarily match up to the one that I'm looking at that I got all my marks in. Doubtfully, lady kind of spat. He blew from down here. Ralph took the shell. Gosh, that's when so then the honk of silence. I bet you can hear it for miles. And then one came. What's your name? That's when they're talking to him. Where is this? What am I looking at? See, this is how a little unfamiliar. Here we go. So Ralph looked up. We can use this to call the others, have a meeting. They'll come when they hear us. He beamed at Ralph. That was what you meant, didn't you? That's what you got the conch out of the water. And what he's doing here is he's giving Ralph his ideas. Like, these are things that Piggy's coming up with. Piggy wants Ralph to be the leader very badly. It's kind of that, again, we talk about politics. I mean, other than, but for the most part, we really do. A lot of times we like people based off their attractiveness. They can be rotten people, they can be monsters inside, but we do very much judge when it comes to, a lot of times in politics. Again, you think, when's the last time, we used to have really big presidents. We don't. I mean, I guess current guy's not the greatest shape, but we haven't had a president with a mustache ever since televisions. Once people are able to see presidents, we haven't had a president with a beard. The idea of judging people based off their looks. Piggy wants Ralph very badly to be the leader. He really does. But Ralph, just because he looks the way that he does, and he does kind of take charge at the beginning, there is an issue with Ralph's leadership, and we'll see that. So as they blow this and other boys come out. You get these lines here again, what the little boys do. The children gave them, their simple obedience that they had given to the man with the megaphone. So again, the little kids, they want to follow somebody. That's what they've been taught. These other boys were, Ralph's older, he's 12. And he's a handsome kid, and he's got the conch in his hand, and so they come in, they sit down because that's what they've been trained to do. Here the idea of heads full of eyes that watched Ralph and speculated. Something was being done. And that idea is something. That's what we hope for. And it's really awful time right now that we're looking at this whole issue with the coronavirus and people watching the news and and it's just this idea that we're just hoping. We're just hoping, hoping that something is getting done. That's and that something is being done right. We put people in charge and we trust them that they're going to do the right thing. And hopefully that is the case. And then we get this description here, and we finally meet Jack. Now, Jack is our antagonist, and we immediately are supposed to not be okay with Jack. And again, the author, all kinds of descriptions here of Jack and his choir. It's choir. They're singers. They were a singing, choir. And Jack is the guy that was he's kind of the guy that was in charge of. He's the captain of the choir, which doesn't make him, he's not like he's a super important guy, but he's got his guys very much under control. And they come walking out here, very much kind of got a military sort of a vibe going on, right? So it's a military vibe. And if you look at all of these descriptions here, there's a lot of stuff talking about black. They're wearing very dark clothes, black cloaks. So, lots of you look at the words here, all the negative stuff that were, I don't know if halting is negative, but, blazing beach, all of this real negative words, this connotations that come in here when we meet Jack. The description of Jack himself is one that's, again, here we got Ralph, the fair hair boy. And then when we get to, when we get to Jack, inside the float, his hair was, you know, red. His face was crumpled and freckled and ugly. So again, we turn against Jack right away, and that's the author. You know, he's doing that on purpose. He doesn't have time. It's not a very long novel, and it's not about him trying to necessarily build the characters. He wants us immediately to be joining, you know, jumping sides for a purpose because he's trying to prove a point. We meet Simon, who becomes very important later on. Simon is the young boy that has he has a seizure. Let's see right here. So it's right here. Then we meet this boy, and this young boy, like I said, we will you know, more of him later. He's one of the guys that goes on the trip with him in this chapter. But all right, they all join in. Ralph, you know, Piggy asked Ralph to say what his name is, and Ralph goes ahead and says it anyway, and they all make fun of him. They all join in. They're all bullying, and they're all together in that. And that's, again, something that is not out of the ordinary for young boys. If we go to here, this here very much points, the Toya voting, they're voting, right? And this here very much points out what Golding is trying to do. This Toya voting. Jack started the protest because he wants to be he's already in charge of his choir. He wants to be in charge of everything. But the clamor changed from the general wish for a chief to an election by a claim of Ralph himself. They all immediately joined. As soon, you know, you got the boy that came out that was in charge immediately was Ralph. They pinned their hope on Ralph. He's standing there, doesn't really know what to do, but he seems like he's doing something. He has an air of superiority about him. He's an attractive kid. And they all immediately assume he's the leader. So when they vote, it was a natural for them. None of the boys could have found good reason for this, which, again, you know, the intelligence, Piggy's the intelligence. And you're right, the most obvious leader was Jack, and 100% right in there. But there was a stillness about Ralph as he sat that marked him out. There was a size and attractive appearance, and most powerfully, there was the calm, right? Conch show. So they all vote for Ralph, and there's not much Jack can do about it. He's not happy. Then, first decision that Ralph makes is a bad one. First decision. So first thing he does is, right here, he puts Jack in charge. Now, when you're in charge, putting somebody else in charge of another group is a really bad idea. And so, especially somebody who doesn't know Jack, Jack has already shown himself to be somebody that seems to be rather uncaring, seems to be very much a control freak. He wants to appease Jack. He realizes that Jack's could be a problem. So rather than being forceful and dealing with Jack, instead he tries to appease him, thinking that Jack is probably more like him, not realizing exactly what it was that Jack is. You know, and you can even see here that Jack, the anger, Jack, how angry he is. And then, you know, the choir belongs to you, of course. They could be the army or hunters. And you look at the very first thing that Jack thinks of with his, you know, and it should be an alarm. There should have been an alarm. The very first thing he says is they can be an army, which there's no reason for there to be an army. There's no fighting on this island. There's no reason for there to be any sort of, they're just simply trying to survive. Jack's first reaction is we can, you know, an army's goal is to attack and to fight and to, you know, and Ralph tries to bring in some sense of, you know, I guess, you know, not intelligence, but, you know, he's trying to bring in a sense of, you know, common sense here that, you can be hunters, you know, because they're going to need food. But again, it kind of gets brushed over. But again, there should have been an alarm bell, should have went off in Ralph's head. And I think it kind of did, but by then it's too late. I mean, at that point, it's too late. And the choir is basically 100% loyal to Jack. So, you know, it never should have happened, but it did. All right. So they go on their journey, and they're going to see if this is an island. Now, the one thing is that we get it's shaped like a boat, which has something going on later. But what we're supposed to take from this is the fact they've got food, they've got fresh water, The things that they need on this island, they don't. So this in the way Golding is setting this up is this is supposed to be Garden of Eden, and the idea of the story of the Garden of Eden. They come in and then it's perfect. They're going to live forever. Adam and Eve, and they screw it up, and and that's what brings sin into the world. And so we're supposed to, in a sense, see that. So the island itself is set up perfect, but even though it's perfect, just like we talked about with the what ends up cutting into it is the scar. What comes from the scar is the boys. What do the boys represent? So, this idea of sin, that's an arrow, by the way. I don't know what this is supposed to be. This is supposed to be an underline, and that's supposed to be an arrow. Anyway, so cool. So, that's a scar. The airplane creates a scar. Coming out of it is like an infection. It's very much like an infection. The boys are an infection, and they infect this island. And so I'm just kind of going through. It goes through a while a bit. They explore the island. I'm trying to find these cool names here. These need to come back. Call them something wacko and lizard smashing, right? That's cool. We should bring those terms back. You guys should bring back. Interesting here. They get to Ralph turns to the others, and just like human beings tend to think, this belongs to us, immediately lays claim to something. There's not like there's no animals on this island. There are things on this island, and the first thing he does is come in and they're conquering it. This belongs to us. And then even farther down, eyes shining. If I can find that so far down here. Probably easy for you to find. Yeah, right here. See, they savored the right of domination. Now, the interesting thing here is this is kind of the last time we see this. They were lifted up, were friends, and this is really the last time that this is going to happen, especially with Jack and Ralph. They savored the right of domination, and this is key to the story because, again, they savored the right of, the idea of dominating is so inherent. I mean, it's something that it's almost like we're born to do this. To dominate other people. We get to, this is something that kind of gives a little bit of foreshadowing with Simon. The boys see these things, they scramble up, drop the flowers. Here they pause and examine the bushes. They like candles, candle bushes, candle buds. Ralph, sees things. Well, you can't like them. He sees things, but there's a mysticism, I guess you would say, kind of a poetry with. Let's see if I can spell this. Spell it wrong. You know what I mean? Mysticism. There it is. The rest of it. Mysticism. Let me see. It? Is that any? Whatever. But there's that with him. Like there's like he sees the beauty in things. This kid's Simon, and that all comes up later on. Then we get to the situation of the pig. Right? They come across this pig that is it's a piglet caught in some creep. Right? These vine creepers are vines, by the way. They're jungle vines. And at that point, Ralph, I'm gonna have to go back to that because it's something that I totally missed. Let me see if I can find it now that I've done all this. But there is a part where I'm looking for right here. Jack snatched from his behind him. So Jack has a knife. Seems like a pretty big knife, sizable sheath knife, and clouded it into a trunk. And that's a weapon, right? And he's really the only one on the island with a weapon like this, with this knife. And this knife becomes incredibly important and it gives him power. You think about the countries that are considered the most powerful in the nation, you know, and for the most part, they're the ones with the atomic weapon. Now, the interesting thing about this novel here is that supposedly there was a nuclear attack. And so these nations, when you think, well, they wouldn't do that to each other because it would destroy the world, well, they have done it. And they've launched these nuclear weapons on each other. On this island, the symbol of that weapon is this knife. And so this knife becomes incredibly important. Now we get to this point here with Piglet, and it's caught, and Jack's going to kill it. They're going to have meat, you know, good pork chops, some sausages, you know, awesome, fantastic food. Some, you know, nice pork spare ribs. There came a pause. The pig continued to scream. So there's this screaming, and the creepers are jerking. And what does he do? He pauses because pause. Okay, I'll pause. A hiatus. The pig continued to scream, and the blade continued to flash. The pause. This is right here. It was long enough for them to understand what an enormity the downward stroke would be, because we're talking about, you know, we're talking about death. We're talking about killing. And even though there are these, you know, there's this war going on, these boys have been taught their entire lives not to do this, right? That's something that we get taught from early on. Don't kill people. It's in the Bible, right? The big, you know, thou shalt not kill. And it's all through mythology. You know, don't kill people, don't kill people. And that's something we're taught not to do. And we know that if we do this, that we are going to be punished severely. We're going to get our freedom taken from us. We're possibly get our lives taken from us. And we understand what as it says, the enormity of the downward stroke. Even though it's a pig, the idea of killing a live thing is there's an immenseness to it that Jack's not ready for yet. Then the piglet tore loose and he left. And then what we get is you get this where he's going to have to justify himself. And Ralph questions him. Why didn't you? They knew why. I was choosing a place next time, he said. And next time there would be no mercy. And this is really the part with Jack. And again, the boys don't see this as just something that's inside of Jack. We know that this is not a good thing. Well, we should know that this is not a good thing, because we've already been set up to understand that Jack's not necessarily a good person. So that ends chapter 1. I hope that that information has, you know, in this situation here, I just wanted to bring up also that this idea of the island, one of the things that Golding is talking about with this as well is the idea of establishing rules. But what happens when, and we'll see this in the next chapter, but what happens when the boys realize there's no consequences? This is very much like you think about in the classroom. The very first day, kids come in. Most of the time, they're pretty, you know, anxious, quiet. But as kids begin to act up, nothing happens, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it's worse. The idea that there's behaviors, and there's no consequences, then those behaviors just are inherent. They're just going to get worse. They just are. And so the thing about this is what happens when these boys realize, you know, there's no adults here. And who are supposed to create the consequences? Well, the consequences are supposed to be created by the leaders, which are Ralph and Jack. Should be the ones that are created, especially Ralph. They should be the ones creating these consequences. So we will see what happens to that in the next chapter. So I am going to stop sharing. And you can see that I have taken my glasses off because I can't see anything. And I am going to stop this, and hopefully this helps you. And if you have any questions, put them up on Classroom, and I will do my best to answer those questions for you. All right, hope this helps. Hey, actually, why don't you do me a favor on Classroom? Why don't you tell me if that helps or not? And, you know, give me some, if there's anything I can do different, give me some pointers, because I'm looking to improve. All right. All right. Well, I'll see you in a couple days. I'll make another one of these for chapter 2. All right.